Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to learn to draw a peony, but because this is a watercolour channel, we're going to add a splash of watercolour to it. So grab your paints and your pens and let's get started. So a different setup, I've got my Winsor and Newton fine line pens, and down here we can see the different sizes. So this is the finest line, that's the thickest line, because the numbers go up from 0.1 up to 1. And then I've got a pencil because we're going to begin with a pencil line first. So as with all my watercolour paintings, I usually start off with a stem, just a line like that, and I'm going to draw a lovely big sort of open peony flower, and what I want is a curve which crosses over at the stem, and that is going to be the sort of base of my flower, and it's going to just show me where everything's going to open up from. But also it's really important that you have a bit of stem continuing along, because you need to get a sense of the direction of the centre of the flower and where everything's opening up from. We're going to pop in a few leaves, but we won't worry too much about putting those in yet. We're going to focus on the flower. So I'm just going to move my pens to one side and focus on the pencil drawing first, because I think when you're new to line drawing, giving yourself a fighting chance with a pencil and your rubber is really important. Now I'm drawing a bit heavier here for the sake of filming, but when you do your pencil drawing, try and keep it nice and light. I'm using an HB pencil and I've got a nice sharp point. Now what I'm going to begin with a peony is I'm going to create a ball shape. I mean, when we first get peonies tightly budded up, they look just like complete spheres, and so what's rather nice is the way in which we draw a peony is almost we think of it in the process of different stages of growth. So this central line, which is coming up here, means this is kind of the opening for where our flower is going to start unfurling from. So keep that in mind all the way through. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just from that central point, and I am placing in overlapping frills of petals, and we've just sort of created an opening using some overlapping top edges, and now I am going to just start to draw in the top edges of the next layer of petals. But in my head I'm imagining that every petal is anchored from this point here. So in my sort of imagination drawing up, I'm going to then not obviously put the pencil in there, but I just want to keep on imagining where these petals are all coming from. Now as we come around the side, it's a little bit trickier. We want to sort of start getting a nice sense of petals kind of opening up, so I'm going to just start wrapping petals around, and then around the back they're also going to start sort of coming up around the edge. And the peony petals I'm doing have got a nice sort of almost like a big scalloped edge on them, and they're just wrapping around the top. Now we're also going to find that these petals are going to start sort of closing in around the edges, so I'm just drawing one here, and then it's just going to twist in, and I can just start to add that extra curve to show we're starting to get a sense of the actual shape starting to get larger. Now as these peonies open up, also the petals are going to start to peel off and outwards. So this next layer, I'm going to start to bring in a few more wayward petals that are just sort of unfurling a little bit more. And then still at the bottom here, we're just constantly thinking, coming out from there, and now these petals along the bottom are really starting to stick out. But if we want to get a sense of a petal sort of curling up, all we need to do is add in an extra little line there. So just come in, and suddenly our petal is curling up on itself. So I'm just going to add in a few more. And I'm just trying to sort of even up the shape a little bit. So we've got this lovely sort of unfurling of petals, really, really nice and abundant and full. And now we're going to have a little look at the leaves. So leaf shapes on peonies have got they're sort of quite long, slender leaves, but they do have a nice sort of soft roundness to them. So I'll start with a large one there, but then you always get some littler ones growing off as well. So we've got our big central line here, so we'll pop in one there and then add in a few others there. So if you want to draw your central line first and then create your leaves off the side of there. And then the stem itself, obviously this needs to be a bit thicker, so we can just fill out the stem a little bit more. So that's all we need for our peony. In fact, that's really quite a lot of detail. So I'll leave my pencil to one side. Now what I like to do is to just rub out the pencil just a little bit to just make it a little fainter. So I've got my kneadable eraser, it's a putty eraser, link in the episode notes to get yourselves one of these. So I'm just going to give it a light rub out and then we can start doing some drawing. So that's just been made a little bit fainter. And the important thing to mention is when you're doing those pencil lines, you're just doing the absolute bare minimum. Now is the time we're going to really get a little bit of detail in with the pens. Now, I'm not going to use the top two, the thicker pens. My favourites for doing general outline is the 0.5 because it's thick enough to have good coverage and not spend ages drawing in, but it's thin enough that it's not going to be really cloggy. So I'm going to begin with the 0.5 and then the 0.3 and 0.1 will come in a little bit later. But I'm going to begin in the same manner. I'm going to start up here where I started drawing in pencil first. So I'm just going to begin by outlining, and I might sort of come in with a little bit more detail, a little bit more finesse. But my main aim is to use the guide that my pencil drawing did for me in the first place. So I'm just going to start by filling in all the lines. So that's all the basic lines of the flower done with my 0.5 pen. It's always important to put the lid back on when you're not using it. And now try and put them back in order just because I'm always scrabbling around trying to work out which is which. So my size 3. So what can we do to make this peony even more round and textured and lovely? Well, one thing that I notice in a peony is the petals do have a sort of line texture. I mean, there are so many different types of peony that it doesn't always apply, but it also just helps with the sense of roundness. So if I, for example, take this petal that's one of these sort of outer edges of the circle, the sphere, I've still got the faint pencil line here, which means that I can use this 0.3 pen to just get a slight sense of the roundness coming out from that petal. Let's try another one here. So this petal here, we were imagining drawing it like that. So imagine those lines are coming up and they're sort of fanning out as we get around the side. we're not only creating a sense of shape, but we're also giving the idea that these petals, this is like almost like a little bit of shadow going on here. So I'm just going to start to place in some more of these lines that are just helping give a sense of the curve. Now the other thing is we're going to have little sort of overlapped little lips here of petals, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the lines to create that sense of curl there, but also I could put in a tiny bit of sort of almost like cross hatching underneath, which is pure shadow. So cross hatching is what it sounds like. It's just doing lines in one direction and then crossing them in another direction to get a bit more of an actual shady spot. And right down in the center here would be a great place for some more of that. We're probably not going to see any of the filaments and anthers inside this peony, so we can just go ahead and fill in some proper shading inside there, but I'm still starting from sort of down on the bottom edge of this shape because there is a chance that a little bit of light might get in. So with this 0.3 pen, we've got the lines helping us create a sense of curve, but we've also got just the little bits of cross hatching where we want to get real sort of darkness and shadow in there. Time for a little bit of the smallest pen, and this is a really fine dainty pen. What I want to do now is just add even more sort of detail and sort of fragility to the edges of some of these petals, because a peony petal has a real sort of frilly edge, and so what I'm doing is I'm just using this really fine line pen to just accentuate some of the curves that I've already put in. And you really wouldn't want to do this with your thicker pens because it's a subtle thing we're doing here. And I maybe just want to add in the odd sort of curl or frill, just extra little bits. Doesn't need to be a lot, but it just makes a difference. Here's a place we could just add a little fold back of a petal. Now I'm also adding just a few little dashes around the tops of the petals, and sometimes with drawing you can't always explain exactly why this works, but it just does. But it's important to really sort of see what your different thickness pens can do before sort of doing too much with them. Now I'm really happy with that, so it's time to move back down to the stem and the leaves. I'm going to pop in the base of the stem in my thicker 0.5 pen, but I'm aware that there's going to be some possible leaf overlapping the stem. So that's the one big difference. Obviously the order in which you're painting and drawing things, well, when you're using a pen you've got to think about what's going to show up over each other, whereas with watercolour of course we can be a little bit more flexible. But I'm going to pop that leaf in like that as well. So I'm going to keep those central lines in. And draw in my leaves. Leaf lines aren't my favourite thing, but we can do a few on peonies, so I'll just get the 0.3 pen and I'm going to begin with just a few lines coming out from the base of the leaf, nice and light. Doing these quickly like this means that they just skim across the page. Now I am using cold pressed paper for this, which is textured, which you might think is an odd choice, but there is a reason, because we are going to be adding a watercolour wash on top of this once I've finished, and I just love how watercolour goes on cold pressed paper, especially when you are using lots of water and wanting to get a nice blend. Hot pressed paper on the whole is smoother and better for sketching on, but for purposes of today, and you will see what I mean when we come to that point, it's much better to use cold pressed for a really satisfying blend. If you need to turn the page so that you can get the smoothest sort of curved line out of your hand, then go for it. Remember, I'm a left-hander, so I like to do that. The rest of you might like to do that. Okay, and then we're just going to add a few slender leaf lines. They sort of grow out in parallel, not too many, and kind of slide their way up the leaf. And there we go. So I'm going to rub out the pencil now, and then we're going to get set up for a bit of painting. Had a bit of a reshuffle on the desk, and I've got my paints all ready, and I've got two large pointed round brushes. I've got a size 8, and then I've got from the Pro Art Connoisseur Series 100 range a size 12, which is really quite large. Now I'm not going to be colouring in. I am going to be doing some splashes of watercolour. Now this is a technique that is a real trademark of mine in my wedding stationery. It's not something I've shared with you yet on here, so I'm really excited to have a go at that. But it really sums up my approach to painting and colouring in when I was younger. I really didn't enjoy colour, and so I used to fling it on the page. So let's go. I've got a permanent rose here, and I am just going to begin with some yellow in the centre and start to just drop in a little bit of the pink. And what I want to do is just create a sort of energy, I suppose. So there we go, just playing around with colour, but still respecting the sort of the shapes that I've created. So now with my large brush, I'm just trying to get most of the paint off it. Oh, you might hear Crumble barking in the background. And then we're going to add just a dab more concentrated orange into the middle there. And then I've got some sap green. I like to sort of make a little section of page wet and then sort of drop in a little bit of stronger colour there. And then the last thing we're going to do is a bit of a splatter. Well, that's a lot of permanent rose. I've put a new bit in my palette. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to use the brush quite a bit of colour, quite a bit of water on it, and I'm just going to flick colour across the page like that. And there we have a peony with a splash of watercolour. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating these videos that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you're getting on. And of course, if you subscribe, then you'll never miss another video. Until next time, bye!